Hello and welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. Today, the Up and Up series makes another appearance as we are going to update and upgrade our Saskia the Unyielding EDH deck. Greetings and salutations to the MTGBC, that is, the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome back to another installment of our Up and Up series. And you can tell by the lack of towering double-sleeved cards in front of you that it seems we're going to make some pretty extensive changes in overhauling our Saskia the Unyielding deck, and we are going to do that. The mana base is going to get a massive overhaul, and we are going to refine, strengthen, and enhance our token strategy, because that's what this four-color deck is built around, making tokens, and then doing all kinds of things with those tokens that will make our opponents say to themselves, why am I sitting here wasting my time? All right, so we're going to start off with the mana base upgrades. We're going to speed through here a little bit, and you're going to see the end game of this as we get towards the end of this particular part of the video on the ultimate payoff card. But more importantly is that this was a mana base that really needed some upgrading with the four colors, and we just needed to find a better way to fix the mana to make sure that we can manage all the spells in a four-color deck as best as we possibly could. That was not something I could confidently say in the past. It is something that I can say as soon as we complete this video. So coming out, card number one, a basic forest is out. Going in its spot is a basic snow-covered forest. Coming out is a basic mountain, and going in its spot is going to be a basic snow-covered mountain. I think you're pretty much seeing where we're going here. So we got a basic swamp coming out, a basic snow-covered swamp going in. And lastly, for our fourth color, a basic plains going out, and a snow-covered plains going in. All right, next up, we are going to pull another basic land of each of the colors. So that's a forest, a mountain, a swamp, and a plains. Those four lands are going to come out, and to put in its spot, those four basic lands are going to yield to four fetch lands. So we've got the colors right here. We've got our Verdant Catacombs for black and green. We have our Marsh Flats for white and black. We have Arid Mesa for white and red. And we have Bloodstained Mire for black and red. And once they become available, i.e. an additional copy makes itself apparent in the collection, or they get reprinted, then we can look forward to also adding Wooded Foothills and Windswept Heath. But each of those cards are pretty pricey right now for the purposes of adding them to this deck, so we have to wait for them to become available, either via sale, via reprinting, or via the destruction of a current deck in the Burgeoning catalog. All right, next up, we are taking out each of the three battle lands. So we have a Canopy Vista, a Cinderglade, and a Smoldering Marsh. Now these lands are fetchable. They do give us one of two different colors of mana, and they do ETB tapped unless we control two or more basic lands. So with a four-color deck, I think it would be safe to say if we can find some lands to replace these three lands that are also fetchable and also provide multiple colors of mana, even if they were to come into play tapped, it would still be okay. And two of those three lands are going to be replaced by an Endatha Triome and a Savai Triome. So these two lands are going to replace two of those three battle lands. They're both fetchable. They both provide one of three different mana, where the battle lands only provide one of two. And yes, there's no way these don't come into play untapped in this deck. However, as an added feature, we could cycle these bad boys away for three if we need to do so. And for the third and final battle land, that's going to be replaced by a Mana Confluence. This is going to give us one mana of any of the four we need at the cost of one life. Admittedly, the Mana Confluence may just be a place setter right now until another Triome becomes available, particularly the ones from the streets of New Capenna. When those two become available, which will be the Riveteers and will be the Riveteers and the Jetmir. The Jetmir is the Naya one, and then the Jund one. When each of those two Triomes from Streets of New Capenna become available, they will replace Mana Confluence and some other land that I don't know at this time. But that's for a future episode of the Up and Up series. One more land is coming out. That's going to be Castle Ardenvale. It came into play tapped, and thus we control the plains. It taps for 1 plains, and we can invest 2 and 2 white mana and tap Castle Ardenvale to create a 1/1 white human creature token. Not terrible for a deck that's built around creating tokens. However, the land that's going to replace Castle Ardenvale is going to be much better at doing what Castle Ardenvale is supposed to do, and that is Field of the Dead. This is going to come into play tapped. It's going to tap for a colorless, which does nothing to help us with our 4-color spells. But whenever this land or another land enters the battlefield under our control, if we control 7 or more lands with different names, we create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. This now is a true singleton land base, meaning that every single land in the deck has its own unique name. Even the plains, the mountain, the swamp, and the forest have the snow covered of each, and then that's all. There's a total of 8 basics. The rest of the lands we saw that are going in here, and then the rest of the lands that are already slated in the 99. This will allow us to create tokens in a token strategy deck just by utilizing one of the basic fundamentals of the game, playing lands. And we're not quite done changing the land base yet, or the mana base. We are going to make another slight change. We're going to downsize the land base by 1 land, but we're going to put in its spot something that's going to help us to ramp better, as well as something that's going to give us another reason to create those sweet, sweet creature tokens. So let's talk about the last land that's coming out. Grim Backwoods. That is going to come out a tap for a colorless, which, similar to Field of the Dead, does nothing to help in a 4-color deck. So with a premium being made on fixing the mana in the deck, any utility lands really have to have an ability that makes it worth staying in the deck. And for Grim Backwards, we invest 2 in Golgari colors and tap this land to sacrifice a creature to draw a card. Prior, that was decent. Now, it's just not good enough. So with Grim Backwoods coming out, we're going to lose that land and its potential ability to draw us a card, and in its place, we are going to put Idol of Oblivion. This artifact has a mana value of 2. We can tap this to draw a card, and we can only activate that if we created a token this turn. This is a deck that is specially built to create tokens, so we will be able to draw more cards off of Idol of Oblivion at a much less intense investment of mana than Grim Backwoods ever could. And in a pinch, we can pay 8 mana, tap and sacrifice Idol of Oblivion, and we can create a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token. With the number of token doublers we have in the 99 of this deck, that is an ability that we can look at as a potential game-winning ability. Having the ability to just tap this to draw a card whenever we create a creature makes it much more valuable than what Grim Backwoods was giving, which was much more valuable than what Grim Backwoods could do for us, which is the investment of 4 mana and a land and sacrificing one of our tokens just to draw a card. Here we're just tapping an artifact. All right, the next card coming out, we are going to take out Runescarred Demon. So there are a couple thoughts here. This is a demonic tutor on a stick, but we do have tutor effects in the 99 already. This does come at a pretty hefty cost of 5 and 2 black, so we are investing 7 mana. We're getting back a 6/6 flyer that when it ETBs, we get the demonic tutor. However, it does nothing more to help with the token strategy. It doesn't synergize with tokens. It doesn't allow us to do anything with our tokens. Yes, the tutoring effect will allow us to get something from our deck as a way in which to find some synergy with our tokens. But the 7 investment at this point in time, this card is going to have to come out to make room for a more streamlined vision as to what we want to accomplish in this deck. So with Runescarred Demon coming out, we are going to put in its place a card that we can use to synergize our tokens with a great more deal of refinement, and that's going to be Ashnod's Altar. Artifact for 3, we can sacrifice a creature to add 2 colorless mana to our mana pool. Because this deck cares about, expendable creature tokens, we can create a ton of them, sacrifice them to the Ashnod's Altar, and create a large amount of mana for one of our game-winning X spells, which are just... We can look at those as our win conditions in the deck. Those are already established in the 99, and Ashnod's Altar is going to give us a way in which to make sure that we can utilize those X spells with even greater efficiency. Imagine having a token army of 15, 20 tokens. We tap our Gaia's Cradle to grab 8 green mana. To grab, 15 green mana, and then we sacrifice those 15 creatures to the Ashnod's Altar. We get 30 colorless mana. Now we have 45 colorless mana. And let's say we're going to cast, maybe we're going to think about casting a Debt to the Deathless. Maybe it's an Exsanguinate. Maybe it's a Torment of Hailfire. Maybe it's a Comet Storm. Ashnod's Altar is going to help us do more with our tokens than Runescarred Demon could. All right, next up we are going to replace a couple of cards that are in the deck to help to synergize more of our token creating strategy. So the first token creator that's going to get replaced by one that is much better is Hooded Hydra. So this is a Hydra X and 2 green. It comes into play with X+1/+1 counters, and whenever it dies, we create a 1/1 green snake creature token for each +1/+1 counter on Hooded Hydra. There's also the benefit of it coming into play with its morph cost of 3. We pay 3, it comes down face down onto the battlefield as a 2/2, and then we can turn it up for 3 and 2 green at any time, and if we do, we put 5 +1/+1 counters on it. So with Hooded Hydra, we kind of have a couple of hoops to jump through as a way in which to create these creature tokens. First, we need to invest the mana to get +1/+1 counters on it so that we can make the creatures when it actually dies. And one of the things that really works against this creature is even if we were to jam a bunch of mana into it, waiting for it to die, there's very little we can do with it in combat because it is a trampleless Hydra. Who wants a trampleless Hydra? I don't, and this is one of the reasons why it's coming out of this deck. So with Hooded Hydra coming out, going into play is going to be Arachnogenesis. This is an instant 2 and a green. We create X, 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach, where X is the number of creatures that are attacking us. We prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by non-spider creatures. You can sucker an opponent in with this card every single time it's in your hand. You tap out, you send everything at your opponent or opponents, leave yourself open, leave yourself potentially vulnerable, wait for the crackback, and when the creatures are plentiful and they're coming our way, we cast Arachnogenesis, we create those spiders, and keep in mind, their creatures don't do any damage, but our spider creatures still do damage, so we can definitely stack up and get rid of some of the most troublesome or problematic creatures that are coming our way, all at the cost of just 2 and a green mana out of nowhere. Arachnogenesis is going to help protect us, and still it clings to our token strategy. The next card that's coming out is Camaraderie. This is an overpriced sorcery for 4 in Selesnya colors where we gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of creatures we control, and then creatures we control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Honestly, I usually find better things to cast when this is in my hand. I have this card in my hand so many times, and I just never end up casting it. I just find different ways to use my mana, and Camaraderie is just one of those cards that's gathering dust in the 99. So I think its time has passed. Let's pull it out, and let's put a card in its spot that will actually favor us casting it, And that, similar to Arachnogenesis, is going to be Ink Shield. Here we have another instant. This time the mana value was a little higher. It's not 3 like Arachnogenesis. Here it's 5 with 3 in Orzhov colors, but we get to prevent all combat damage that will be dealt to us this turn. The kicker here is for each 1 damage prevented this way, we create a 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying. This card is mind-boggling, particularly in a deck that is suited to creating creature tokens with enchantments that can double all of our creature tokens, like Doubling Season, Parallel Lives, Anointed Procession, casting Ink Shield, and preventing 12 points of damage, and we put 12 2/1 flyers onto the battlefield. This card is absolutely ridiculous. I am in love with this card, and I can't wait to see what it's going to do in this token deck. And it is a very, very high vaulting improvement and upgrade over Camaraderie. All right, the next segment of cards we're going to replace is we're going to shore up some of our removal spells. We are going to look to kind of slim down with the removal and try to make a way in which that we can maximize the mana that we spend on those removal spells. So the first one that's coming out is Crackling Doom. This Mardu instant is great against Voltron commanders, but if you're sitting down to a table and the Voltron commanders are not present, you're really just hoping to get some creature off of the battlefield that might be very imposing to us in some kind of combat way. The problem with that is we're running so many different tokens that we're really not worried about any creatures that are on the battlefield. Protection isn't really that big of a deal. I mean, something that has indestructible might be, but unless they have some kind of additional evasion, we have the creatures that we can expend to block those other creatures. So outside of a Voltron strategy, Crackling Doom is taking a spot in the removal portion of this deck that would be better served by a card like Assassin's Trophy. Here, this Golgari instant, we pick a permanent of an opponent, and we get to destroy it. We destroy target permanent opponent controls. That opponent does get to search their library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield, so they are gifted with a basic land. But you know just as well as I do that there are permanents on the battlefield that sometimes make it worth destroying and gifting our opponent with a free basic land. And that is if they do have a basic land. With so many players, wanting to upgrade to 3, 4, 5 color builds, the basic land is going the way of the dinosaur. And I don't mean Galta or Jasath. It just seems more and more people are straying away from including basic lands into their deck. So it is quite possible that from casting an Assassin's Trophy, that opponent may not even have a basic land in their library. All right, next card coming out, it is Vraska Relic Seeker. So here we have a Planeswalker with a CMC of 6, comes down onto the battlefield with 6 loyalty counters, so it's pretty hefty. I mean, 6 loyalty counters is pretty big. Plus, it does have the ability to create a pirate token. We put 2 loyalty counters on Vraska, and we can create the 1 pirate token, so it does have the potential of protecting itself. I mean, we are still talking about EDH, where generally it is a format that's very hard to protect our Planeswalkers. Her big bang of taking off 10 loyalty counters and making a player's life total become 1, well, let's just face it, that is a game-ending proposition for one of the opponents. The middle ability, which was one that was included just because of her ability to destroy target artifact, creature, or enchantment, and then we create a treasure token. So with that in mind, the investment of 6 mana, let's say that gets us to destroy 2 target artifact, creatures, or enchantments and create 2 treasure tokens. So in the long run, we get the 2 treasures back as a way in which to hedge against the 6 mana investment. But again, that's if Vraska is still on the battlefield, that if she doesn't get picked off through any spot removal, or if she gets swarmed or some kind of evasion comes in and knocks her off. Let's replace Vraska's removal ability. We're not going to miss the token ability a great deal because we have so many other token enablers in this deck, but let's replace the removal ability with a copy of Generous Gift. 2 and a white instant, destroy target permanent. We gift its controller with a 3/3 green elephant creature token. We don't care because we're running tokens as well. And if we have, let's say, Doubling Season, Anointed Procession, Parallel Lives on our side of the battlefield, it may be worth it to destroy one of our own token creatures just to get 4 more. Actually, it would be a lot more than 4. Imagine doubling and then doubling and then doubling again. All of a sudden, it's looking more and more likely that we may cast Generous Gift on ourselves. All right, next card coming out, it is Utter End. Exile target non-land permanent at instant speed for 2 and Orzhov colors. Here is the thing. We have a lot of other spot removal spells. We do still have, the Anguished Unmaking is in this deck, and we have, we just put a Generous Gift, Beast Within is in here. So we can afford to take out a spot removal spell for more of a for more of a board wipe spell, particularly a board wipe spell that will benefit us the most because we are a creature token based deck. And that spell is by invitation only. For one more mana overall than what the one spot removal spell of Utter End is, we have a sorcery where we get to pick a number between 0 and 13, and each player sacrifices that many creatures. We should almost always have more creatures than our opponents. So by casting by invitation only and choosing a number high enough to rid the board of all of our opponent's creatures while we still have creatures on our side of the battlefield is so much more advantageous than the spot removal spell of Utter End. And notice, it's sacrifice that many creatures, so that will dance around protection like Indestructible, Shroud, and Hexproof. By invitation only is going to be a very sneaky potential win condition in this deck. The next swap, we're going to take out Merciless Eviction, which is, sorcery speed 4 and Orzhov colors, exile all artifacts, exile all creatures, exile all enchantments, or exile all planeswalkers. Pick one of those 4. I don't want to just pick one. So let's use the same mana value of 6 and replace it with Farewell, and I'll choose any number. We do lose the ability to exile planeswalkers, but that's replaced by exiling graveyards, and this is not a graveyard strategy deck, and it's not like that's a very famous, it's not like it's a very well-played archetype in Commander, right? Graveyards? No, not at all. Let's replace the planeswalkers with the graveyards, keeping the artifacts, creatures, and enchantments, and let's choose any number of them. Farewell is just a straight-up upgrade to Merciless Eviction. The next card coming out is one a little uneasy to bring out. So we may see something in the future. If Saskia ever returns to the Up and Up series, we may see this card make its way back into the deck. Coming out is Krosan Grip. Now, I usually try to include a Krosan Grip in any deck that I have with green, just for the potential to stop any infinite combos from going off and winning the game. That has died down quite a bit in my metagame. I don't know so much about my LGS because many moons have passed since I last played there. But the role of the infinite combo right now is lying dormant. So as long as that's the case, Krosan Grip is going to come out for something that suits the form of this, that suits the theme of this deck a little bit better. I will say, if by any way those start to seep back into the meta, or a return to the LGS discovers that it's still running rampant there, then Krosan Grip will make its way back into this deck. For right now, however, and the way in which we're trying to synergize the token theme of this deck, Krosan Grip is going to get replaced by Pest Infestation. It's a sorcery for double X in green. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with a double X, you just have to pay the same amount of mana for each X. So if we want to destroy up to X target artifacts and or enchantments, if we want to destroy 3 artifacts and or enchantments, then we have to pay X3, we have to pay X another 3, and then pay green. So we're channeling 7 total mana into this spell. And when we do that and we destroy those X target artifacts under enchantments, we get to create twice X 1/1 black and green pest creature tokens with, when this creature dies, we gain 1 life. So we swapped out Krosan Grip with a 1-shot of removal for 1 artifact or enchantment, and we replace it with 1 that we can use as much mana as we can possibly generate, and then we double the number of tokens that's generated as well. So we get removal more than 1, and we get to create a bunch of tokens. Perfect for what we're doing in this Saskia deck. All right, next up, a few more cards that are going to come out to make way for some cards that are just going to synergize better with what we're trying to do in this deck. Coming out is God Eternal Bantu. This was a 5/6 zombie god with Menace, and when it ETBs, it allowed us to sacrifice any number of other permanent cards. I'm sorry, other permanents, not permanent cards, other permanents, and then we draw that many cards. And of course, because Bantu was a god, if it dies or is put into exile, we get to put it into our owner's library 3rd from the top. So it doesn't necessarily have indestructible, but it's tough to get it to bring back. This 1-shot sacrifice effect is not always useful. There could be times where our tokens are doing other things that we don't want to sacrifice them for card draw. Our board is so strong that we would be better not doing that. So God Eternal Bantu was one of those cards similar to Camaraderie that was just collecting a little bit of dust in our hand. So let's take out a dusty card and replace it with a win condition. And that win condition is going to be a Chroma's Will, one of the best cards from Commander Legends, and a card that still is criminally underloved. 3 and a white at instant speed, we're going to pick one of the following 2. Either creatures we control gain flying, vigilance, and double strike until end of turn, which, let's face it, that's like the ultimate offensive breakdown. Or creatures we control gain lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors until end of turn, which could be looked at as a defensive stalwart mode to choose. However, if we control our commander, if Saskia is on the battlefield when we cast her Chroma's Will, then we get to pick both of those features, which means creatures we control will get flying, vigilance, double strike, lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors until end of turn. What a fantastic way to send a massive token army into combat led by Saskia. Next card coming out is Deathbringer Thoctor. Now here we have a creature that's for 4 in Rakdos colors, comes down as a 3/3, but whenever another creature dies, we put a +1/+1 counter on this dude. Then we can remove a +1/+1 counter and have it deal 1 damage to any target. So in a way, this could act as removal, but it is a little slow. It is kind of closed off. It's a vacuum in and of itself. It doesn't help our board outside of the potential for getting rid of any kind of dork creatures that are on the battlefield. It is beneficial that it's whenever another creature, that means it's any creature on the battlefield, including tokens. So the +1/+1 counters could get really, really high on this guy, but it just does not synergize with what we're trying to do with all of our tokens. So for the minute ability that it has for removal, I thought it would be more beneficial to put a card in that does act as more of a mass removal, but then does have further benefits after that spell is cast. So with that in mind, trying to have some kind of additional benefits going after having a Deathbringer Thoctor, if we're going to look at a card that's going to act as a removal, maybe more of a mass removal, and then also have some benefits afterwards, let's include the Meathook Massacre. Enchantment for X and double black, it's going to ETB. Each creature is going to get -X until end of turn. And whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent will lose 1 life. As opposed to a creature dying with Deathbringer Thoctor, it'll put a +1/+1 counter on it that we can remove to deal 1 damage to an opponent. We can have a creature that we control dies and have each opponent lose that 1 life. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, we gain 1 life. With a large token army and so many sacrifice outlets on our side of the battlefield, we can look at Meathook Massacre as a potential win condition, particularly because we can just pay the 2 black and have that come down and have none of our creatures die. The last card in this little subsection of the video coming out is Cathar's Crusade. This is a really tough card for me to pull out because it does have some really good synergy with the tokens, especially if there's any burst token generation, like an Avenger of Zendikar putting 7 plant tokens into play. Suddenly, all of those tokens are getting tons of +1/+1 counters from Cathar's Crusade. However, because we've constructed this deck in such a way to have many sacrifice outlets as a way in which to kind of abuse and exploit some death triggers that are already in the 99, I thought a better version of a card could be included in place of Cathar's Crusade that can just give us another way in which to win the game without having to worry about putting so many +1/+1 counters on our tokens if we're looking to sacrifice those tokens anyways. And that's going to be Debt to the Deathless. Yes, we foreshadowed this card a little earlier in this video. Well, here it is now making its appearance. This is going to take the place of Cathar's Crusade and instantly add another win condition to this deck. Double white, double black, and X. Each opponent will lose 2 times X life, and we gain life equal to the life lost this way. Ashnod's Altar, you have been approved by Debt of the Deathless. Alrighty, we got just a handful of cards left to complete this Saskia appearance on the Up and Up series. The last 7 cards that are coming out and being replaced by 7 cards are cards that are being, let's say, upgraded, of course, because that's the name of the series, right? But we're looking to further enhance our overall token strategy. So let's begin with taking out a Hangerback Walker. This was an XX construct that ETBs with X +1/+1 counters, and when it dies, we create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying for each +1/+1 counter on this dude. And we can pay 1 and tap this to put a +1/+1 counter on Hangerback Walker. So similar to what we talked about when we were describing Hooded Hydra, there are a little bit of a couple, there's a couple of hoops we need to jump through in order to get the biggest bang for our mana buck in getting these token creatures. So with that in mind, we're going to take out all of those hoops and just replace it with a straight up token generator, which is Chatterfang Squirrel General. 2 and a green, 3/3 legendary squirrel warrior with Forest Walk, of course. If 1 or more tokens would be created under our control, those tokens plus that many 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens are created instead. So although this is not exactly like a Doubling Season or an Anointed Procession or a Parallel Lives, in a way, it is a squirrel-centric version of those particular enchantments. We are going to get double the number of tokens that we create, but some of them, half of them, are going to be of the squirrel variety. And as an additional bonus, we can pay a black mana and sacrifice X squirrels to give target creature plus X minus X until end of turn. So there are some offensive and defensive capabilities built in here with Chatterfang. But more importantly, Chatterfang is going to help us to really synergize the token strategy that we have built in this deck. The next card coming out is Krav the Unredeemed. It's a 3/3 demon for 4 and a black that we get to pay a black mana and sacrifice X creatures. Target player draws X cards and gains X life, and we put X +1/+1 counters on Krav the Redeemed. So Krav does give us the ability to get some cards. It gives us a sacrifice outlet. I mean, it's a cheaper one at just paying 1 black mana. But again, it's not helping us to generate more of our tokens. What we're doing with these cards is we're trying to find ways in which to create more tokens, synergize with them more, and try to drive home the point that we are going to overrun the board with tokens, and then we're going to make our tokens do things other than just going into combat. So Krav the Unredeemed doesn't really fit into what we're doing with this deck anymore. So it's going to go the way of Hangerback Walker, which, let's face it, faced a similar fate as Hooded Hydra. Replacing Krav, and one very similar to what Chatterfang does, is Ginny Faye, Jetmir II. Now, this isn't necessarily the exact same thing that Chatterfang does, but we do get to become a little more selective on the tokens we create. This Elf Druid is a green mana and then a hybrid Gruul or a hybrid Selesnya. And if we were to create one or more tokens, we may instead create that many 2/2 cat creature tokens with haste, or that many 3/1 green dog creatures with vigilance. So instead of creating 1/1 tokens, we get the benefit of 2/2 and a keyword ability, or 3/1 and a keyword ability, all by just having Ginny Fey on the battlefield and under our control. Plus, with the 40% discount on the mana value from Krav, Ginny Fey is going to have the same body and toughness and allows us to do more with tokens than Krav was going to let us do. All right, next up, we are going to take out Conqueror's Pledge. This is a sorcery 2/1 triple white. We get 6 1/1 core soldier creature tokens. If we kicked it to move the spell up to 11, we get 12 of those tokens instead. Although burst tokens are very, very beneficial, particularly in a deck like the Saskia build, I think we can do better by replacing this one-use card with something that may be able to generate us even more tokens if its presence on the battlefield isn't prematurely interrupted. And that is going to be by replacing Conqueror's Pledge with a copy of Scute Swarm. This 1/1 insect has the landfall mechanic that whenever a land ETBs under our control, we create a 1/1 green insect creature token. And if we control 6 or more lands, we create a token that's a copy of Scute Swarm instead. So this has some similar characteristics to what Field of the Dead did for our mana base. And if we're going to have that on a land, let's put it onto the body of an insect as well, because if we do get to that sweet spot of 6 lands, then Scute Swarm is just going to continuously double every time we get a land onto the battlefield. And if we have any of our other token doublers, like Doubling Season or Parallel Lives or Anointed Procession, then Scute Swarm is going to absolutely take control of the game and should end up bringing us victory very, very quickly, particularly if we have a Perforos God of the Forge or Impact Tremors on our side of the battlefield when Scute Swarm continuously multiplies. Next card coming out, Tendershoot Dryad. Here we have a Dryad for a mana value of 5 on a 2/2 body. It does have the Ascend mechanic, which means if we control 10 or more permanents, we will have the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. Getting the City's Blessing in this deck is not difficult at all. At the beginning of each upkeep, we create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. So even on our opponent's upkeeps, we are still putting a token onto the battlefield and under our control. If we have the City's Blessing, saplings we control get +2/+2 as long as that City's Blessing is on our side of the battlefield. The problem with Tendershoot Dryad for the investment of 5 mana is it doesn't give us the burst that we're looking for. We don't really want to look too much into having tokens be created over time. If we're going to invest that mana, we want to see a much more immediate return, particularly in a deck that is going to really reward us for getting as many creature tokens onto the battlefield as quickly as possible. So because of those conditions, Tendershoot Dryad is going to come out, and it's going to be replaced by a card with the exact same mana value, but should be much more beneficial to what we're doing in this deck, and that's going to be Primal Vigor. Now, I have to say, Primal Vigor does have the potential to help out our opponents, because this is a global doubling season. So if any player at the table were to create tokens, they create twice that many tokens instead. And if any +1/+1 counters are going to be placed on a creature, twice that many are placed on that creature instead. So this is a doubling season for the entire game. We are not very strong at all with +1/+1 counter themes in this deck, particularly post-revision. Now, pre-revision, there was a small +1/+1 counter theme woven into the deck, but that is no more. Now we are full-fledged token doubling effects, and Primal Vigor is going to help us more than it's going to help our opponents, as long as our opponents aren't also sitting down with the kind of super buffed, enhanced token strategy that we have here with Saskia. If that is the case, maybe it would be best to leave Primal Vigor in your hand. All right, next card coming out, it is Mazrik, Kral Death Priest, 2/2 flying with another mana investment of 5. And you can also see that we're either trying to match up the same mana value or try to undercut it as a way in which to keep tempo on our side. This Insect Shaman reads, whenever a player sacrifices another permanent, we put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. So we harken back to when we brought out Cathar's Crusade. That was a card that really helped to build up the +1/+1 counters on our creatures, but if we're using our creatures in so many sacrificial ways, it doesn't really make sense to include any kind of +1/+1 synergies when we should be looking at more ways in which to create these tokens and find ways in which to continue to build our side of the board so that we can take advantage of all of those various death triggers and other enter the battlefield triggers that we've talked about already in this video. So with that in mind, Mazrik is going to come out, and Mazrik is going to be replaced by another card with a mana value of 5. This time it is Rabble Rousing. This is an enchantment with Hideaway, so when it enters the battlefield, we're going to look at the top 5 cards of our library, and we're going to exile one card face down under Rabble Rousing. And whenever we attack with one or more creatures, we create that many 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. Then, if we control 10 or more creatures, we may play the exile card without paying its mana cost. Honestly, for the purposes of this deck, the Hideaway mechanic is completely irrelevant. Even if it wasn't present on this card, this would still be an absolute amazing stud of a card to include in this deck. We have 10 sacrificial tokens on our side of the battlefield. We have a Perforos in play. Let's send those 10 tokens into combat, most likely meeting their doom. We're going to create 10 more tokens and then send 20 damage to each of our opponents. Being able to cast a card from the Hideaway ability without paying its mana cost, let's be honest, that's just gravy on top of the mashed potatoes. All right, 2 cards remaining. The next card coming out, that's going to be Xenagos the Reveler. Planeswalker for 3 loyalty counters, 2 and Gruul colors to cast. Its +1 ability of adding X mana in any combination of red or green to our mana pool, where X is the number of creatures we control. That one might be a little bit tough to reconcile losing. Because we are so committed to building a monstrous board of creature tokens, anything that can give us any kind of mana involving those tokens, we should keep in the 99. However, its replacement should do a pretty good job of not necessarily mimicking that value, but giving us some mana value in its absence. Xenagos could also zero himself to put a 2/2 red and green satyr creature token with haste onto the battlefield, but similar to what we were talking about with Vraska, the one creature, it's okay, it's a little slower. We're looking to create more tokens at greater pace. And plus, sometimes it is difficult to protect planeswalkers in Commander. So, and then the last ability, of course, isn't really going to help us too much, because there aren't a ton of creature cards in this deck. It says exile the top 7 cards of our library. We may put any number of creature cards or land cards from among them onto the battlefield. This is a very token-heavy build, but a lot of the tokens that we create are from instant and sorcery and enchantment spells, and not so much from actual creatures. So the Big Bang ability of Xenagos will not be missed at all. Now, replacing Xenagos, we are going to tick up the CMC. The mana value is going from 4 to 6 on its replacement, but boy oh boy is it a doozy. It's going to be Bootlegger Stash. This artifact is 5 and a green, and lands we control have tap, create a treasure token. Now, you've heard throughout this video talking about Doubling Season, talking about Anointed Procession, talking about Parallel Lives. Those are all, and now Primal Vigor. Those are all enchantments that allow us to double the tokens that are created, not necessarily creature tokens. It just says whenever an effect creates a token, well, this is an effect that's going to create a treasure token. So can you imagine tapping one of our lands to get double the treasure tokens, or maybe doubled again? Or what if we will tap this, and in conjunction with some of our other spells, maybe we so choose not to create the I'm speaking a little bit too ahead of myself here. Let's pull out Ginny Fey as an example. So Ginny Fey reads, if we were to create one or more tokens, we may choose to create a 2/2 cat with haste or a 3/1 dog with vigilance. So let's say we don't even want the treasure tokens. Let's say we just want to tap one land to create one token. And let's say we have 2 doublers on our side of the battlefield. Suddenly we're going to tap one land. We're going to create that treasure token, but instead we'll pick the cats. So now we're getting 4 2/2 cats for tapping 1 mana. And that's if we don't even want the treasure tokens. So 1 green mana for 4 creatures with combined power 8 and toughness of 8 just by tapping 1 land. Bootlegger Stash has the potential to do some absolutely absurd things in this token deck, and I can't wait to synergize it with all of the doublers and the creature tokens that we're going to create right alongside it. All right, the last card coming out, it is going to be Increasing Devotion. Now, this is very similar to Conqueror's Pledge. This does give us a nice burst creature token generation. I mean, we're paying 5 mana to get 5 1/1s, and then we can flash it back for 10 mana to get 10 1/1s. But I don't know from a one use and done standpoint if this is the best card for the deck right now. Its replacement can do more at various points of the game and allows us to really put in the mana to get as many creature tokens as possible. You'll see what I mean in one moment. So we're going to take out Increasing Devotion, and it's 2-time potential use. It is 1 mana per 1 creature tokens, and that's pretty good odds. But its replacement, Grand Crescendo, it is an instant, so this allows us to cast it on our opponent's turns. It's X and double white, so we're certainly not going to get the mana of 1 mana per creature token. But in its place, we get instant speed token generation, and we give creatures we control indestructible until end of turn. So similar to the protective effects of Ink Shield and what was that other card that we put in there? And Arachnogenesis. This is going to help to protect our board, protect our creatures from board wipes, from combat. And let's face it, this is an end of our last opponent's turn. Instant army that we can put right into play, even if we don't need to use it for the indestructibility mechanic. So Grand Crescendo is going to replace Increasing Devotion, and it's going to do a much better job of what we're trying to do in this deck. Like I said at the beginning of this video, an overhaul was necessary in this Saskia deck, and this might have been the greatest overhaul we've ever had in an installment of the Up and Up series. I look forward to your comments in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.